what I love about theater and why I'm so glad that in my adulthood I've been able to start doing theater more for fun again is that it is this beautiful temporary experience, right?
Yeah.
Like it is what it is in that moment. And if you record it, it's never really going to capture what it was like exactly. It's going to be different every night that you do it. And like if you did it for longer than the run that you had, it would be a different show. So maybe my lack of sentimentality is because of my own sentiments about kind of the philosophy I have around theater. I mean, when I was in The Play That Goes Wrong, I enjoyed watching that show because it's a very fun and funny show.
Right.
And there's so many like set gags that I didn't get to see because I was backstage. But, you know, I was ensemble for the musical White Christmas, and I was pretty much there a lot of the time. And it's like when I wasn't there, it was a friend of mine singing a song. And I like when my friends sing songs, but I kind of already saw them do that.
Also, we can go to karaoke. We can sing songs whenever we want. It was so funny last night. So I do this thing in New York called Serials. The problem with it is that we all want to hang out afterwards, and the show starts at 9:30. So we don't normally get to where we're hanging out until close to midnight. And where we've been hanging out recently is at a karaoke bar. And I, last night, was like, every time there was like a banger of a song, I was like, I can't sing because we're gonna be out late. Like, I think I got home at like 2:30, and like I can't sing because I'm not gonna be able to record the podcast tomorrow. And I was like, I'm being such a diva about the fact that I cannot sing at karaoke because I need to record the podcast tomorrow. But it's like I can feel it in my voice right now where I'm like, oh, I like didn't sleep enough last night, I didn't drink enough water, I was out late, and I can feel it in my voice. I'm like, thank God no one made me sing last night. Me full Kristen Wiig, don't make me sing.
Speaking of God, hello and welcome to Informed Attraction, a podcast hosted by one cult disguised as a religion and one guy with a lot of child brides. A podcast about how sometimes Cousins is married. I'm Dr. Aubrey Hoffer.
I'm Mackenna Goodrich. I think I'm cult disguised as a religion, and you're one guy with a lot of wives.
Specifically, a lot of child brides.
Yeah.
My child brides, they are more wards. They are not.
Yeah.
They are not brides who I am having sex with. They are little Robins, and I am Batman.
You have a gaggle of boys, just a gaggle of lads.
I got lads. I got ladies. I got babies, and they're all in little Robin costumes.
Muppet babies, what the right is really afraid of. The woke leftist Marxist puppets.
So.
Zoran Mamdani. Oh, I'm so sorry.
This week, and I think this will extend into a part 2, we are talking about Mormons.
The Book of Mormon. Hello.
I have
me moments after saying "Don't make me sing."
You know my like fantasy that I have with you that would never happen, and there's like just no context where it would happen. It would be specifically me and you singing "You and Me," but mostly me from the Book of Mormon.
It's so funny that you say that, because when I was watching the Tonys this year, I sent a voice memo to Jessie Joe, and I said, Jessie Joe, one of the few things that would get me back on stage would be me and Jessie Joe being Elder Cunningham and Elder Price in the Book of Mormon. And what's really funny is then with You and Me, I'm like, well, then I would be Elder Price and you would be Elder Cunningham.
Yes.
And I literally was like, the greatest Book of Mormon casting of all time is me and Jessie Joe Aka as Elder Cunningham and Elder Price. Broadway. Jessie's on the Wicked tour now. Make this happen. I don't have any clout, but she's got a little now.
I bring a certain Josh Gad type of energy to the function.
You sure do, buddy.
Oh, make me Olaf next. You know what? Cast me in the Olaf spin-off Disney Plus series where Olaf meets a girl Olaf with eyelashes.
Olafettes.
Yeah, Olafette. I'll be Olafette. Unfortunately, this is certainly going to happen. I will not be cast in it. It will be Melissa McCarthy, but it should be
I was going to
me.
say it's going to be Rachel Zegler.
So yeah, this week and next week we're going to be talking about Mormons. Today's episode is probably going to be about explaining what is Mormonism and what are the beliefs and general culture around Mormonism. And then next episode I think is going to focus more on the specific appearance standards around Mormon and Mormon individuals, as well as the cultural impacts of Mormonism on pop culture. One of the biggest culture shocks for me moving from the Southwest to the Midwest is the lack of cultural presence of Mormons where I live now. Because growing up in Arizona, basically, if you were a religious person, it was honestly probably 60-40 that you were identifying as Mormon where we grew up.
We do have to remember that the reason for that, because I had the same experience when I went to college in Ohio, and I was around Mormons constantly, and then I never was. It's because the Mormons got their shit kicked out of the Midwest.
Yes, we're gonna get into that.
Yeah, and so it's but we just grew up in an area that was so heavily Mormon, and especially, as I'm sure we'll get into, the Mormons love to perform. So me doing community theater, I would say most of the youth theaters I did growing up, I was in the strong minority not being Mormon. Yeah. Jessie Jo, who I just referenced, her high school was 80% Mormon.
Yeah.
She was constantly getting asked to school dances by boys and then being like, wait, LOL JK, my parents said I have to take a girl who was in my ward instead.
Basically, when I talk to people who didn't grow up where we grew up, they're sort of confused and they ask me a lot of questions about what Mormons are like. Basically, where we lived in Arizona, if somebody was like, oh yeah, I'm a religious person, they were either like, oh yeah, I'm kind of non-denominational Christian, or I'm Mormon, or less likely Catholic. Yeah. Whereas where I live now, you are Catholic or Methodist, Baptist, something else. I drove by a Mormon temple recently and I was like, oh, there.
Yeah. I lived by a Mormon temple in New York, funnily enough, but what's interesting to me is that we didn't grow up around a lot of Jewish people. No. And then, I went to college and I went to a small liberal arts college, and so then all of a sudden a lot of my friends were Jewish, and now I live in New York where a lot of my friends are Jewish. But then, and that's just kind of been a whole switcheroo, because growing up, it's again, I would say 50% of my friends were Mormon. Mm-hmm. And it was just this very odd. And I literally, shout out to India, who's been on the podcast before. India was my one friend who was Jewish growing up. And so it's just it was this whole switcheroo of things. And absolutely, if you didn't, besides my friend Mark, who grew up in Hawaii, no one else who I went to college with or am friends with now, besides the other people from Arizona, understand being around a bunch of Mormons the way that we did, because it just was exactly where we were living in Arizona was so heavily Mormon.
Yeah, in addition to growing up in an area where a lot of Mormons lived, the maternal side of my family is almost exclusively Mormon. My great-grandfather was a bishop in the Mormon church, and my grandfather left the church in his teens. So basically, everyone on my maternal side of my family who is not in my grandpa, grandma, my mom, and my aunt, they are Mormon. So I have a ton of extended family, cousins, people who I know who are Mormon.
Which is just, again, so crazy style to me, because me and Aubrey have been friends for over a decade, and I found out that information on the podcast recently. And for me, it was completely different because no one in my family is Mormon. And I lived in Montana until I was 8. And so I wasn't around any Mormons when I was a kid, and I didn't really have an understanding of what it was until I started doing dance and theater in Arizona, and then suddenly I was meeting a lot more, especially when I started doing stuff in Gilbert. That's when I started meeting up people who were other people. I started meeting people who were Mormon, and so I didn't really start interacting with folks who were Mormon until I was 10 or 11.
Mm-hmm. When I was under 18, I would get comments from people in middle school and high school who would sort of assume that I was Mormon.
Yeah.
Because I I do think like phenotypically, not now when I have like tattoos and things, but when I was young and I dressed quite like kind of preppy and conservative, like I think I did fit into a little bit of like the Mormon girl looking archetype.
I guess I just don't know because I didn't grow up down. When you were in the southern part of Arizona, are there a lot of Mormons down there?
Mainly like fundamentalist Mormons.
Oh,
so
it's like the FLDS, okay.
yeah, so we'll talk a little bit more about that and the kind of like fundy Mormons who I grew up with. So just context for everybody. When I met Mackenna, I was 16 years old and I had transferred to essentially like the Phoenix Valley area. But before that, I lived in a rural town in southern Arizona. And the fundies that I grew up around were not like the like fundies as you would think of them with like,
the
you
Warren
know,
Jeffs fundies,
yeah, no, these were more of like, they were definitely kind of like doomsday prepper adjacent. Yeah, the way that I would describe them is like they didn't go to like, they were not like the archetype that you think of when you think of Mormons is like very like clean cut and crisp, and they go to, you know, the temple and they like do all of their like family activities. The Mormons who
they go to the swig.
Yeah, the Mormons who I grew up with who were more fundamentalist were more like, you know, we're like prairie folk, like we're like they really like leaned into, and Mormons in general really like a lot of like colonial history and things like that, but they were really big on like, you know, we live off the land, and you know, it was more of that like rural belief, and I think much harder and firmer in the conservative views than the Mormons who are in my family and the Mormons who I met when I moved to, you know, more metropolitan Phoenix, who are, you know, city folk.
Do you know about the like the Nauvoo performances, the Nauvoo pageants?
Well, we're gonna talk about Nauvoo later, but
okay,
I don't know about the Nauvoo pageants.
Oh, okay. So I had because I you know, I did a lot of theater with a lot of Mormon folks. So basically, throughout the summer, there's these like pageants, like these like musical and theater performances that are these like tributes to Joseph Smith that happen, you know, like that basically like tell the history of Joseph Smith, and they happen in Nauvoo. And like I knew a bunch of friends who like would go be in these pageants in Nauvoo during the summer. And it's because they're all, you know, set in when the founding of the church happened. They're all like in like 1840s dress, and so it was just like constantly like, you know, people I knew would go and be in these things in the summer and be posting all their pictures in their like 1840s outfits, and I was like, yo brother, this is crazy shit, I'm doing hairspray.
Yeah, with the surge of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, Mormon culture and appearance standards are becoming more mainstream. The phrase Utah curls is becoming part of vernacular, and it evokes this image of long, blonde, or highlighted hair that is like, you know, immaculately curled. And Mormon families are stereotyped as these white Stepford families with their idyllic family fun nights, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Basically, if you grew up around Mormons, Mackenna, we'll see if this is a universal experience or if this is just an Aubrey Hoffer experience. I believe that if you grew up in an area with Mormons, everyone can recall one elusive Mormon where they were like, they're really sexy enough to convert? No. But what if?
I would never, there was no one who I would have converted for. Mostly because for me, the elusive sexy Mormons were girls.
True.
So it really would have had to been them doing a wraparound to leaving the church, and not the other way around. But I do know, I have a friend who, when he was 16 years old, had a girl convert for him. And like got fully baptized for him when they were like 16. And I don't think either of those people are Mormon now. I'm not in contact with her. The boy I speak of is a good friend of mine who's still in New York. But that was, I remember when that happened and being like, yeah, that's a crazy decision to make when you're 16.
Yeah, to get a little, just briefly into some of the more cult-like aspects of Mormonism, my sister-in-law is 34, and when she was 18, had a boyfriend who she started to convert for. She was baptized, and to this day, Mormons go to my in-laws' house asking to speak to my sister-in-law because they want to get her back.
Yeah, I would say, here's the thing. I would say the similarities sort of stop at a certain point, but there are many commonalities between the Church of Latter-day Saints and Scientology in, I would say, specifically the recruitment and conversion processes. After that, they start to be more diverging in the Yellow Woods, but also some of their death beliefs have a lot of things in common. And so it's really interesting. Everyone kind of acknowledges that Scientology is a cult. It's really interesting with Mormonism because I feel like for people who didn't grow up around Mormons, they either are so, like, they're just like, oh, it's like another part of Christianity, or they're so 10 toes down that it's a cult. I think if you grew up around them, you probably have a more nuanced view of them, but it is very interesting now that I also know someone whose sister converted to Scientology. It doesn't sound that dissimilar than people I know who have converted to Mormonism, that the process of that happening.
Yeah, I tend to lean more in the camp of Mormonism having more in common with Scientology than Christianity.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean Joseph Smith and L. Ron Hubbard have more things in common than Joseph Smith and Jesus Christ, so.
Exactly. And I don't know, part of me is like, should I try to be more respectful of this religion as we discuss it in this episode? But also, I do think that as an institution, the Mormon Church has caused great harm to many people, especially women and children. And I think that its attempts to brand itself as something increasingly progressive and diverse are just branding. My big takeaway with a lot of Mormon stuff is that, like, the Mormons changed their mind about black people in the 1970s. My biggest prediction of the Mormon Church is that they're going to change their mind about queer people in the next 20 years in an attempt to get more people indoctrinated and in the culture. And I don't think that it comes from anything altruistic or good. I think it is an enterprise that wants increasing political power in the United States. And I think that it is bad that it is continuing to get more powerful.
There are many things to be said about the Book of Mormon musical, but one thing I will say is, what a banger, and the song I Believe is the lyric, and I believe that in 1978 God changed his mind about black people. Black people! Because it's just like, yeah, like, what the fuck do you mean?
Yeah. We're going to have a whole portion in next episode where we talk specifically about Book of Mormon, and I want to get into the goods, the bads, the many layers of critique that people can have of it. I will say, just as somebody who grew up around Mormons, you know, Book of Mormon, there's some bangers in there. There's gonna be some bangers in there, and do I think that we maybe need to keep letting it go on? I don't know. But you know, a warlord that shoots people in the face, what's so scary about that? Plays in my head on a constant loop.
When I need to hype myself up, I am like, man up.
That's the thing. South Park guys, great at writing music.
They are.
So a lot of people who are listening might not even really be familiar with what Mormons are or how their beliefs differ from mainstream Christianity. So I'm going to really try to make today's episode a clarifying mission. So this should be like an introduction to what Mormonism is broadly. I'm not going to go into like every specific element of the theology and in theological differences, but I'm going to try my best to do kind of a broad strokes. Here is what Mormonism is, and here is generally what the beliefs and what the culture is like.
Aubrey, I got a crazy thought experiment for you.
Yeah.
If Christianity is pop music, what is, because you said mainstream Christianity, right?
Yeah.
What is Mormonism?
So, you know, interesting theological argument here is, would Christianity be pop music, or would Judaism be pop music?
Well, I'm just saying if we're calling like, it's like if mainstream music, if Christianity is mainstream music, what is Mormonism?
I think it's like country pop.
Okay.
Like it is.
It's Jelly Roll.
No, it is literally, it is Jelly Roll. It is, because it's like, you don't really know anybody who like rides hard for Jelly Roll in your personal life, but like, then you see videos of a Jelly Roll concert and you're like, what the fuck? And then you're like, holy shit, this guy's got #1 singles. And you're like, this is like an entire experience in music that I just am not even privy to. And then maybe eventually you meet like a friend of your mom's who's like, oh my God, I love Jelly Roll. And you're like, Pamela?
Also, I would say that Christianity is pop music, and I would say Judaism is folk music.
Whoa, that's powerful. That's powerful.
Thank you.
Because that's one of the like theological. So you know what? Fuck it. We'll get into it now. Because one of the theological arguments with kind of categorizing Mormonism is it that Mormonism is like a sect of Christianity? Or we think of like the kind of 3 major religions as like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Is it Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and Mormonism? Or is Mormonism its own sect within Christianity? But if you make that argument, some people would argue that Christianity is its own subsect of Judaism.
Judaism is the original, Christianity is the sequel, and Mormonism is the threequel.
It's almost like I was listening to Shania Twain earlier, and I was like, Taylor Swift would be nothing without Shania Twain. So Judaism is Shania Twain, Christianity is Taylor Swift, and Mormonism is Sabrina Carpenter.
Whoa, that's crazy.
But
I thought you were gonna say like Kelsey Ballerini or something. I wasn't expecting Sabrina to be brought into this, but I see what you're saying.
But that's it. Could Sabrina do what she does if there hadn't been another little blonde bitch doing it?
I mean, I think there's been lots of little blonde. I think you could argue that Sabrina Carpenter couldn't have been doing it if Britney Spears wasn't doing what Britney Spears was doing. Little blonde bitches have existed far before Miss Taylor Swift.
I understand that, but I think if we're gonna make this like pop culture argument, right? Like the appeal of Sabrina Carpenter is also an element of like she is writing this music herself, whereas Britney Spears is not writing the music herself. And that's like and that's where I'm seeing the like lineage of like Taylor Swift was doing the I'm writing my music and being a pop girly, but she was doing what Shania Twain was doing.
This is interesting.
So that's where I'm tracking the lineage, and I think in a similar way we can track the lineage of Mormonism through.
Hello, this is Aubrey and I's course. It's called What Pop Stars Are Religions. It will count towards either a music credit or a religion credit, so it'll fulfill one of those credits. I am here to be your dumb guy and who just yells at Aubrey about her takes. We're both professors, though. This is like the class I took that was a neuroscience and philosophy class, where it was just a neuroscientist and a philosopher screaming at each other for an hour and a half every Tuesday and Thursday.
Awesome. So Mormonism is the principal branch of the Latter-day Saint movement started by Joseph Smith and
we should say this because we've been saying Mormonism, and a lot of Mormons are really pissed off.
I have a note about that.
Great. Okay, great.
So I'll just clarify that point right now. Is Mormons have tried to rebrand multiple times by saying we don't want people to call us Mormon. We find that derogatory, and you should refer to us as LDS. Basically, since 2018, the LDS Church has expressed the desire for its followers to be referred to as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or just members, if the identity of the church is made clear previously in context. They find the term Mormon to be derogatory. The idea of using Mormon in a derogatory way goes back to the early 1800s.
Yeah.
And also, my argument of why I'm still saying Mormon is, number one, I just don't care. Number two...
Number one, fuck them.
And number two, they've tried to do this multiple times and it never takes. So they
have fucking long, bro. The members of the Church of Latter-day Saints? No. Also, you can't be the members. There's members only clubs. That's already a fucking thing, bro. We gotta have a short, pithy term for your church. Your church. We got the Scientologists. We got Muslims. We've got Christians, we've got Baptists, like, it's like, we got Catholics. You cannot have me call you members of the Church of Latter-day Saints.
Or members. Like, oh
No!
yeah, members. It's like, no. You are not share. Like, you do not get you are not members, okay? Basically, the LDS Church, the Mormon Church, has made efforts in 1982, 2001, prior to the 2002 Salt Lake City Olympics, and
was it prior to 9/11, Aubrey?
It must have been after, because it was for the 2002 Salt Lake City Olympics.
Never forget.
And in 2011, after the Book of Mormon appeared on Broadway, and again in 2018, to encourage the use of the church's full name rather than just saying Mormon or LDS. Basically, anytime Mormons have something going on that makes them relevant in pop culture, they try to say, hey guys, don't call us Mormon, call us LDS. And it just never takes, and I don't know, guys. I think
it's Joe Reform since Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. You know what I mean? It's like,
right.
I don't think you can come back from Secret Lives of Mormon Wives.
And the reason why there is this push, and part of why I am sort of refusing, is because the term Mormon causes concern for Mormon church leaders because it has been used to splinter groups such as fundamentalist Latter-day Saints who practice polygamy, which the mainstream LDS Church does not. Basically, anymore, which we'll get into. But basically, for more than 100 years, the mainstream Mormon Church has gone to great pains to try to distance itself from those who practice polygamy, and it doesn't want there to be any confusion between those two groups. But unfortunately, like, as we will talk about, polygamy is baked into the fundamentals of Mormon history and practice, so it is, again, just a branding thing for the Mormon Church to try to say, we're not like those other Mormons, when in fact, they're more like you than you're like you.
Let me say this, and I mean this 10 toes fucking down. Joseph Smith was a person, but he's not worthy of what I'm about to say. Brigham Young, on the other hand, is on my list of people I wish I could exhume from the fucking dead just so I could choke the damn life out of him again. And you're like, Brigham Young, as in BYU? Yes, that guy was a psychopath.
Yeah. We're going to talk about him, but first we're going to talk about the granddaddy.
Me when I fucking get you, Brigham Young. I'm coming for you.
Yeah. So, Mormonism is the principal branch of the Latter-day Saint movement that was started by Joseph Smith in upstate New York during the Second Great Awakening. If you're like, what is the Second Great Awakening? The Second Great Awakening was a religious revival during the late 18th and early 19th century in the United States. Basically, it spread religion through revivals and emotional preaching, and it sparked a number of schismatic movements. So revivals were key to the movement and attracted hundreds of converts to new denominations. Basically, this was a time in American history where kind of all of these little micro churches and denominations were like, let us dance for you like court jesters, and you shall become one of us. And Mormons were pretty good at it. So the Mormon movement began in Western New York during the Second Great Awakening when Joseph Smith said that he received visions revealing a new sacred text, the Book of Mormon.
Hello! Bomb!
Which he published in 1830 as a complement to the Bible. Based on the teachings of this book and other revelations, Smith founded a Christian church called the Church of Christ. The Book of Mormon attracted hundreds of early followers who later became known as Mormons, Latter-day Saints, or just Saints.
I have to say, a piece of this that I think is very important. Aubrey, wait, are you going to talk about the whole thing about the woman who he was trying to marry?
No, say more.
Okay, so this motherfucker was a grave robber. He was a scoundrel. He was often doing little like japes and tricks in order to make money. He was like a criminal, and he wanted to marry this woman, and her dad was like, you piece of shit, you're never gonna marry my daughter, you're a no good, nothing scoundrel, loser, boy failure. And then one thing that he was good at, Joseph Smith was good at, was spinning a yarn. Mm-hmm. And so what he did, literally the same as L. Ron Hubbard, heard is he spun a yarn about him being visited by Moroni, and eventually Moroni shows him the plates and, you know, like all of this stuff. And this is all off the dome, by the way. And the thing is like all of that was because he was trying to go to P-Town. He was trying to go to Pound Town with this woman whose dad was like, fuck you, boy failure loser. You can't marry my daughter. And he basically wrote this really sick novel about this angel Moroni visiting him and being like, I can show you these plates, but I can only show them to you and no one else can ever see them. And then he went and he was like, yo, what's up, daddy? I'm a founder of this new sick religion. I'm a fucking prophet. And then he marries that woman. Yeah. Anyway, that's some fucking hot goss for you about the foundations of the Mormon church.
Yeah. In 1831, Smith moved the church headquarters to Kirtland, Ohio, and in 1838 changed its name officially to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. After the church in Ohio collapsed due to financial crisis and dissensions among church members, in 1838, Smith and the body of the church moved to Missouri. As a result of the 1838 Mormon War and a state executive order by Missouri Governor Lilburn Boggs, a group of Mormons, including
They didn't have real names back then.
No.
They didn't have real names.
Mormon names are so fun because my Mormon relative, the guy who was a bishop, was Everett Brown.
But like, was Lilburn Boggs wasn't a Mormon, right?
No, he just had a silly name too. What's the most Mormon name you've ever heard? Mine is a kid who I did speech and debate with named Brecken Denler. That's up there.
I mean, I always 10 toes down have to mention my boy Cale Burr.
Cale Burr, sir?
His middle name's Aaron.
Awesome. The 1838 Mormon War, also known as the Missouri Mormon War, was a series of...
Also known as the Warman.
Was a series of armed conflicts between Mormons and other settlers in northern Missouri during the summer and fall of 1838. Initially characterized by mutual vigilante violence, it escalated into direct intervention by the Missouri Volunteer Militia. Basically, the Mormons got into Missouri, and these other settlers were like, hey, yo, fuck these fucking freaks, and then started to do religious persecution.
100%.
You know.
For real religious persecution.
Legitimate. And then the Mormons were like, hey, yo, fuck these people religiously persecuting us, and you know what? These Mormons had hands. And they fought. And the conflict escalated basically until the Missouri Executive Order 44, which mandated the extermination or expulsion of Mormons from the state. Like, here's the thing, guys. As much as I am critical of the institution of Mormonism, I don't think that we should have public policy that says that people should be killed based on their religious group membership. I just don't think that a religious group in the United States should have political power.
Yes.
So
I also should say, I think for some of the, if some of you were like, why did they hate these guys so much? Basically, like what Joseph Smith did is they go to Independence, Missouri, right, which is where all this takes place. Again, this is all off the dome. They go to Independence, Missouri, and what he immediately starts doing is like buying up a bunch of land in Missouri in order to do. You see this happen with like religions and like capital C cults throughout the time of like they'll go to a place and they'll start buying up a bunch of land in whatever place that is and like getting into local government and stuff like that. And so basically they start buying up all this land around Independence, Missouri, and all these other people in Missouri are like, hey, what the hell are these guys doing? Because basically what his plan is to turn Independence, Missouri into the city of Zion.
Yeah.
And like it will be like a Mormon town. And so that was the big thing that they didn't like was that they were like, you're gonna turn this whole place into like you like came in here and basically were like, you're not even from here, right? I think some other things that are notable that like, and this is like very like a pro-Mormon thing to say, like Mormons were much chiller about both like sharing land with Native Americans, and they were also pretty anti-slavery. Yeah. So even though eventually the Mormon church becomes not accepting of black members, they were like accepting of freed black people into the Mormon religion at this time.
Yeah.
And so you have all these people, they're like Southern neighbors who are like, fuck you. We don't want your woke liberal bullshit here, and we don't want you buying up our town. It's very much in many ways the ways a lot of people in Arizona feel right now about all the people from California like moving in.
Yeah.
Like, we don't want your woke bullshit here. And that's very much what was happening in Independence, Missouri at the time. So some points to the Mormons here for, like, being kind of woke, and then basically having the people of Missouri being like, get out of here with your woke bullshit.
Yeah, we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but essentially, until, like, kind of like the 1950s, the Mormon church was kind of woke, and that, like, had, like, views about,
yes,
at least, like, people of color and some minoritized people that were considered liberal, especially in contrast to what was going on with, like, mainstream Christianity at the time, but then, because of branding, changed their minds.
I also should say, especially read the whole thing with Native American folks, here's the thing. They were chill about sharing land with Native American folks, but it's also, like, a thing in the Book of Mormon that, like, basically, that, like, Jesus was, like, originally in the United States, and, like, I think Independence was supposed to be, this is off the dome. Again, I have not looked at this in a while, but I believe Independence, Missouri was supposed to be, like, basically where the Garden of Eden was. Somewhere in the Midwest was the Garden of Eden. Mm-hmm. And there is a thing that this is very disputed by a lot of members of the church, that, like, there's an implication in the Book of Mormon that basically implies that Native Americans are the descendants of people who were rebellious towards God, so he cursed them with dark skin, which basically creates this dichotomy of, like, Native people unenlightened and bad, and white people enlightened, chosen, and good. And so for as much as, like, they were chill about sharing land with Native folks, not, like, woke about the existence of Native people.
Yeah.
I'll just say that it's very complicated, but in comparison to these other settlers in Missouri at the time, they were much chiller about the existence of freed Black people and the existence of Native Americans, while they still harbored racist beliefs.
Yeah, so just, like, quick little, like, Mormon theology segue. The Book of Mormon describes groups called the Lamanites and the Nephites, and historically, many Mormons have interpreted Indigenous Americans as descendants of Lamanites, and some versions of that interpretation said that Indigenous people had been cursed with darker skin because of their disobedience.
So, bad, obviously.
Yeah. And then, like, a lot of people talk about, like, Mormons believe that Jesus came to America. The belief there is that after Jesus's resurrection, he appeared to people living in the ancient Americas. This is, like, one of the central claims of the Book of Mormon, and it's probably the biggest theological difference between Mormons and other Christian denominations. So, according to the New Testament, Jesus was crucified, resurrected, and appeared to his disciples in the Old World. The Book of Mormon basically says that after that happened, Jesus did a little trip over to the Americas and visited the Nephites and others who were descended from Israelites who, according to the Book of Mormon, had migrated to the Americas centuries earlier. And basically, Jesus teaches those people in the Americas the same principles that are found in the Sermon on the Mount, blesses children, heals the sick, establishes the church among them, and calls them disciples. And yeah, that's basically, like, I would say Mormonism 101 is, like, if I had to distill it to, like, a central belief that is different from, like, typical Christians, it is that.
I also would say that, like, Joseph Smith is someone who was very much in survival mode. Like I was saying, this all came from him, like, needing a way to make money and wanting to marry this woman, right? Like, that's he made a lot of money off of doing this, right? And so that is where a lot of this came from. And so, like, saying the Garden of Eden is outside of Independence, Missouri, was a tactic of the fact that they were getting run out of upstate New York, and they were getting run out of Ohio, and they needed to go somewhere, and Missouri had a lot more land available, and so he was like, the Garden of Eden, Independence, Missouri, we gotta go there. And it's like, okay, okay, brother, you just needed to go. So, and you'll see this throughout time, that the goalpost keeps moving as the Mormons keep getting expelled from places. He has more and more revelations about where they need to go.
Exactly. In 1839, the group settled in Commerce, Illinois, where Smith soon became the mayor, and he renamed the town Nauvoo. In 1844, a group of ex-Mormons who opposed polygamy and who had recently been excommunicated from the Mormon Church established the Nauvoo Expositor newspaper. On June 7th, 1844, the newspaper published its first and only issue, which criticized Joseph Smith and other church leaders, reporting that Joseph Smith was practicing polygamy, marrying the wives of other men, and teaching a plurality of gods, and allegedly that he intended to set himself up as a theocratic king. So after a vote of the Nauvoo City Council, Smith, as mayor, ordered the printing press of the newspaper destroyed. The destruction of the printing press led to broader public outrage in the communities surrounding the city. So Joseph Smith and his brother and other members of the Nauvoo City Council were charged by the state of Illinois with inciting a riot. Joseph Smith was apprehended, but he was freed in the Nauvoo Municipal Court. So Joseph Smith declared martial law and called for the Nauvoo Legion to help keep the peace. After failing and briefly fleeing Illinois, Smith received a personal statement from the governor of Illinois, Thomas Ford, who pledged his faith and the faith of the state of Illinois to protect Joseph Smith while he underwent a legal and fair trial. That letter convinced Joseph Smith and his brother, whose name is Hiram, so it was Joseph Smith and Hiram Smith, to return to Illinois and face trial voluntarily. When the brothers arrived in the county seat of Carthage to surrender to authorities, they were charged with treason against Illinois for declaring martial law. The Smith brothers were detained at Carthage jail, awaiting trial, when an armed mob of 150 to 200 men stormed the building, their faces painted black with wet gunpowder. Hiram was killed almost immediately when he was shot in the face, shouting as he fell, "I am a dead man." He was correct. Joseph Smith emptied his pistol toward the attackers and tried to escape by jumping out a second-story window, and he did, but then he got shot several times and fell to the ground, where he was again shot by the mob. So they shot him, he fell out the fucking window, and they shot him again. So Joseph Smith was killed in 1844, which led to a succession crisis, leading to the organization splitting into several groups. The largest of these is the LDS Church, which is, like, essentially, this is who we are talking about. We are talking about the Mormons who, like, are the biggest group that spread after Joseph Smith's death.
Can I say something about Hiram Smith, too?
Yeah.
Hiram Smith was married to 2 sisters, and I think that's important, that everyone just know that.
Yeah.
So he married this woman, and then his sister-in-law's husband dies, and he marries that woman. So he is then married to Mercy and Mary, who are sisters. Yeah. And then he also had a third plural wife as well, but she was not related to the other two. I also think it's important to know that everyone right now, I want you to picture how you think Hiram is spelled. And if you're thinking it's Hiram, wrong. No. It's Hyrum, and that's crazy.
The Mormons were doing dumbass naming conventions since the inception.
It's part of the culture. Like, you're like, oh, Joseph Smith. No, Hiram Smith. It's important.
Yeah. So the largest group that split after Joseph Smith's death was migrated under the leadership of his friend Brigham Young. And Brigham Young brought his group to the Great Basin, which is now Utah, and became known for its 19th century practice of polygamy. So essentially, after negotiating a ceasefire, because, they were still getting mobbed and attacked, Brigham Young was unanimously elected as the church's second president in 1847. During this Mormon exodus, Brigham Young led his followers west from Nauvoo, Illinois, via the Mormon Trail to the Salt Lake Valley. Once they settled in Utah, he ordered the construction of numerous temples, including the Salt Lake Temple, which I have been to. He also formalized the prohibition of black men attaining priesthood and directed the Mormon Reformation. Brigham Young was an advocate for education, and he sought to establish the higher education institutions that would later become both the University of Utah as well as Brigham Young University. If you don't know what Brigham Young University is, like, I don't have the exact number on this. I will say I am somebody who is in developmental psychology in the state of Arizona. In the institution that I went to, there were a lot of Mormons who were interested in developmental psychology because, as we'll talk about later, Mormonism has a lot of foundations in like families and familial relationships, which I think primes a lot of young Mormons to be interested in developmental psychology. So I had a lot of Mormon colleagues when I was in grad school, and almost all of them did their undergraduate training at BYU, and then after they graduated, accepted positions at BYU.
Yeah, the thing to know is, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more next week when it comes to the pop culture stuff, BYU has one of the best BFA dance programs in the country, and the majority of the now I don't know if this is true anymore, but at a certain point, a lot of, if not the majority of the pros on Dancing with the Stars were Mormon, and like there's many dancers out there who are trained at BYU and are Mormon. They have like an astoundingly good BFA dance. They're also like many of their sports teams are very good. It's a huge school. They have three campuses. There's BYU in Provo, there's BYU in Idaho, and there's BYU in Hawaii.
Yeah. As a polygamist, Brigham Young had 56 wives and 57 children, and he has an estimated 30,000 descendants.
Also, to be clear, Joseph Smith also had many wives.
Yeah.
He had between 30 and 40.
Yeah.
Like, so they were both doing it. Brigham Young was just doing it different.
Yeah. Truly the love of the game.
Yeah. And by the love of the game, I do mean the love of marrying at times. For both of them, both Joseph Smith and Brigham Young marrying people who were under the age of 15.
Yeah.
Joseph Smith had at least 5 wives who were under the age of 15 when he was in his late 30s.
Yeah. As we've alluded to, polygamy was a common practice for Mormons, and they openly practiced it until it was politically inconvenient. Between 1852 to 1890, between 20 to 30% of Mormon families were polygamous.
So the thing that I want to say about what Joseph Smith and Brigham Young were doing when it came to this polyamory, I'll put this in the notes, but there's a chart where you can see, like, specifically with Joseph Smith, like he marries Emma Hale, who was his first wife, his OG wife. And then it's a very long time. So the polyamory, the polygamy was a revelation that came to him at some point. It was not an original piece of the church doctrine, I believe. And basically, he marries another woman. Him and Emma Hale get married in his early 20s. He marries another woman in his late 20s. He marries another woman in his early 30s. And then between the age of 35 until his death, that's when he marries the majority of his wives with Joseph Smith. And I think it should be noted that both of them were doing this. I mentioned already that a lot of Joseph Smith's wives were under the age of 15. That is also true of Brigham Young. And basically what they were doing in a lot of these cases is they wanted to have sex with these women and girls. And so what they would do is they would marry them. They would do what is called a sealing ceremony, right? And then they would have sex with them maybe once and then leave them.
Yeah.
And never even speak to them again. There's specifically Brigham Young is the one, because there are many examples of him having sex with a woman a single time and then never speaking or seeing her again. I also think it should be noted, if you look at the chart of Brigham Young's wives, there's things on it about the lower bound age at first menstruation. And to be clear, marrying them, quote unquote, doing these sealing ceremonies with him, and then never speaking to them again. He was marrying them for the purpose of fucking around.
Yeah.
Is the thing that I would say. But yeah. And it's let me tell you, not good.
Yeah. So the other point to be made about like polygamy in the early Mormon church that we're talking about is that Joseph Smith didn't publicly announce polygamy during his lifetime. It was practiced secretly among himself and a small circle of leaders. And it wasn't until Brigham Young moved the church to Utah where plural marriage became much more visible and also institutionalized within the church itself. So once they moved to Utah, church leaders openly taught that plural marriage was a religious duty for some members.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But that being said, right, there were members of the Mormon church who did not do plural marriage. Like, the majority of the church did not. Like, it was at maximum a third of the members who were engaging in plural marriage. But I think it's, again, really kind of shocking and devastating that it is, like, specifically the church leaders who are engaging in this practice, typically as a way to sexually abuse like girls.
Yeah, I think that like you'll never really see in like official things let them claim that they were with girls who were younger than like 15 or 16, but there are disputed accounts of them being with girls who were younger than that, and it's harrowing, and it's bad, and it's not good, and those are all things that I feel about it.
Yeah. So the Mormon Church officially renounced polygamy in 1890 and gradually discontinued it. They did this because Utah territory was barred from becoming a state, essentially until like the United States government negotiated with the church to say, we will make you a state if you ban polygamy.
Right. And then the person who was the the church leader at the time was like, I've had a revelation. No more polygamy. Oh my God, it's amazing. It's nothing to do with the fact that now we can be admitted to the state as a state. Nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with it. It just God told me it's chill now.
Yeah.
For us to be married to one woman, actually.
Yeah. So this change was what resulted in the formation of even more fragmented sects that sought to maintain polygamy and other like older doctrine and practices. That's basically how you get Mormon fundamentalists, is the people who, when the Mormon church said, no more polygamy, a small group of people went, yes, polygamy, and then split off to kind of do their own thing.
If you ever saw the documentary on Netflix called Keep Sweet, that is about Warren Jeffs, who was the head of what is probably the biggest and most well-known sect of the FLDS. The kind of problem with the term FLDS is it can like Aubrey was saying, it can refer to a lot of different groups of people. Not all groups operated the way that Warren Jeffs operated, which was horrible and like widespread abuse, and is like deeply harrowing. That is probably the most well-known example of an FLDS sect. There's a fair amount of also FLDS sects who consider themselves sovereign citizens and aren't a part of the country. I would say that your biggest groups of sovereign citizens in the country are libertarians in New Hampshire, and then FLDS in Utah and Arizona, who will declare that they are not actually citizens of the United States, they are sovereign citizens. Aubrey, you want to hear something crazy?
Yeah.
My friend Becca went on a Hinge date with a son of Warren Jeffs.
You told me this, and that's...
Isn't that nuts?
Yeah. He had a fucking lot of children.
Yeah, so many.
Yeah, basically, like, the mainstream Mormon church has repeatedly stated that the FLDS, like, sect in general is not affiliated with them. So, the thing is, just like Mackenna was saying, FLDS is also, or was also rather, its own institution, like a formalized, like, FLDS, like, church, right, with a structure. But then there are also these like little offshoots where they would identify as FLDS, but not necessarily affiliated with Warren Jeffs specifically. Warren Jeffs was the one who was president of the FLDS church. He became the president of the church in 2002 after the death of his father, and he's currently serving a life sentence in prison for child sexual assault because basically when Warren Jeffs was leading the FLDS church, there was a documented pattern and history of abuse within the group where there were these like forced arranged marriages, child marriage, like women were discouraged from pursuing higher education or careers or financial independence. There was no reproductive control, and women were expected to have as many children as possible because it was their religious duty, and they were isolated from talking to other people, and there was like a constant like religious abuse where it's like you are to fear spiritual consequences if you are to disobey like either Warren Jeffs himself or just the man of your household.
Yeah. They were told to keep sweet, and that's why that documentary is called that. And I think the other thing that like is also a part of the FLDS that like is a very sad thing, is that like the treatment of women and girls was way worse than the treatment of boys, but like there's a ton of like FLDS like teen boys who basically got excommunicated from the church when they were like 14, 15, 16 years old, and then were just sort of like lost because they were basically like, get the fuck out. And then these are people who like don't like have anything, like, you know, and no one really, some of these boys have like shown up, but like some of these boys probably just fucking died because they just were told like go live your life, and were basically like made homeless by their families because they like listened to rock music. But basically I think that I want to say here is that like when we are talking about like Mormon culture, we are not talking about the FLDS, and like I very much do respect the fact that like those are at this point very much separate things, but I think it's important to draw the line of how we got from Brigham Young to Warren Jeffs, because there is a direct path from like Joseph Smith and Brigham Young to Warren Jeffs that is based in what once was church doctrine and no longer is. But so this is not, you know, I don't think anyone who I know that no one who are like friends of mine who are still in the church or anything like that are like, we love Warren Jeffs, that's one of our guys. They're like, no, fuck that guy. And like the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives girly pops are not FLDS. Like it is a extremely different thing than like mainstream Mormon culture.
Right. I think the biggest issue that I have with this topic is that the mainstream Mormon church wants it to be so distinct from a group that has a shared history with it that has caused so much abuse and harm. And I like, instead of, I think, reconciling with that in a really meaningful way, the way that Mormons tend to approach things is like, don't talk about it, deny, deny, deny. And I think it is like bad for the culture. And I think even within like mainstream Mormonism, a lot of these ideas around like keeping sweet, keeping quiet, being a subservient daughter and wife, especially for Mormon women, is still quite prevalent. It's not to the extent that the women who were under the thumb of Warren Jeffs experience, but like, you know, abuse is there in Mormonism, and not that it's not there in other religions or anything like that. I think I feel so strongly about stating this because there are a lot of people who paint Mormonism in a very idyllic way, and there is a rhetoric around Mormon conversion of, if you convert, you'll be part of this community. There's love and acceptance and blah, blah, blah.
You'll get a planet when you die.
Yeah, and like there are those sentiments, and also there is isolation. And there, like, and it's not that you won't be told that you can go to college, but you will be like told about who you should be spending your time with and whether those are people who are aligned with the values of the church.
Right. And that's when, again, like a way that you can like compare to Scientology is in Scientology, there's a thing called SP, which stands for suppressive person. And it's like, you know, if you're a family member of someone who's converted to Scientology who is not a Scientologist, you will probably get labeled an SP and basically be told like not to talk to them. Not all the time, but it happens a lot of the time with Scientology as well, which is why, again, I do see a lot of relationships between these two things. And I think it's also just, like, the nature of when you're a religion that, again, is based on, like, original chicanery and now is very much just, like, trying to survive. And we're getting these revelations of, like, oh, no more polygamy. We can have black people in the church, you know, and... It's like, then you have to, what is interesting about that is then what they are doing is saying, okay, none of this stuff that we did before is a part of the history because God changed his mind about it, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's like, we can't acknowledge the history of racism in the church. We can't acknowledge the history of polygamy in the church. And we have to pretend like the FLDS came from nowhere when it's like, no, because our university is called Brigham Young University, so we can't acknowledge the fact that, like, the practice of polygamy amongst Joseph Smith and Brigham Young was partially so that they were able to abuse women.
Yeah. So after Utah becomes a state, Mormons are kind of just chilling for a while, really building their numbers and developing their, like, culture and society and like building up the city of Salt Lake.
Because also Salt Lake City fucks and Utah fucks. Yeah. Utah is so beautiful. Salt Lake City is so beautiful.
Yeah. During the early 20th century, Mormons start to reintegrate back into the American mainstream, and this is where you start to see Mormon PR. In 1929, the Mormon Tabernacle Choir began broadcasting its weekly performance on national radio, becoming an asset for public relations. Mormons emphasize patriotism in industry, rising in socioeconomic status from the bottom among American religious dominations to the middle class. Basically, Mormons at this time become increasingly richer, and that is something that you see in Mormon culture to this day, where on average, like the average Mormon is wealthier than the average person, partially because of like this history and like building themselves up in this way. So Mormons start to spread out from Salt Lake City, and as they do so, church leaders start to create programs to help conserve the tight-knit community feel of Mormon culture. So in addition to weekly worship services, Mormons start to participate in numerous programs like Boy Scouts, a young women organization, church-sponsored dances, ward basketball, camping trips, plays, religious education programs for youth and college students. During the Great Depression, the church starts a welfare program to meet the needs of poor members, which has since grown to include an entire humanitarian branch that provides relief to disaster victims. It's a lot of like, part of the tenets of Mormonism is this idea of like building your community, giving back to others, like being a good community member. And those are values that I like totally align with. Like, I think that on its face, I think that those are good things to do, is to improve the environment in which you are a part of.
Absolutely.
During the later half of the...
Aubrey, I would say, one of the nicest neighborhoods in Gilbert, Arizona is Acrotopia.
Yes! So it's during the later half of the 20th century where we start to see Mormons becoming more conservative, attempting to, like, regain some status, like, in the United States, like, wanting to start to build up some of that political power. So throughout the 1960s and the 1970s, right, there are these historical changes around women's liberation and the civil rights movement. And basically, Mormon leaders are like, there is an erosion of traditional values happening. There's the sexual revolution. There's more use of drugs. There's like other forces that they saw and presented as damaging to the family. So in order to counter this, Mormons put an even greater emphasis on family life, religious education, and missionary work, becoming more conservative in that process. So as a result, Mormons today are probably less like... I wouldn't say like politically integrated in mainstream society. Like I would say they are like, because basically pre-1960s, Mormons are like really trying to like reach out to people who are not Mormon to help them, not just because that's a good thing to do, but like conversion isn't necessarily at the forefront. We're starting in the 60s. That's where it's like, we're doing nice things for you, and also you should come to like this event or this or that. And like really this emphasis on conversion starts to become more apparent.
Mm-hmm.
And like
we see the codification. Missionaries were always a part of being Mormon, but we don't see like the codification of like every boy should do a 2-year mission until like the 70s.
Yeah.
And so it's like before there were always Mormon missionaries before then, and they started going international. They were worldwide starting in like the late 1830s. Mm-hmm. Then it's really like I think a lot of people, one of the things they know about Mormons is that they go on these 2-year-long missions, specifically the boys. Girls can go on them too. I think the most girl missions are 18 months, but Mormons the missions for young men becomes mandatory in 1974. Yeah, so in the 70s, 1974.
So we've talked about this a little bit, but I want to just be a little bit more explicit about the history specifically with Black people in the Mormon church. So Black people had been members of Mormon congregations since the time of Joseph Smith, but prior to 1978, Black membership was very small. Part of this is because from 1852 to 1978, the Mormon Church enforced a policy restricting Black men from being able to be ordained into the church's priesthood. The church was really criticized for this during the civil rights movement, and the policy remained until 1978 when
God changed his mind about
Black people. Yeah. And part of the interesting thing about this reversal is that there were questions about mixed race converts in Brazil, and the church was kind of like, what do we do here? Because we're in Brazil, there's a lot of people who want to join the priesthood, and they are not white, but they're also not white. What are we going to do about this? And then they said, you know what? Actually, God changed his mind. And in general, this change was greeted with, like, joy and relief. Like, there was virtually very little pushback from Mormons in the church about this change. Most of them were like, yeah, it's about time.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, too, because, like, so I mentioned before that, like, my other friend who grew up around a lot of Mormons was my friend Mark, who grew up in Hawaii. And Mormons have been in Hawaii since the 1800s, I think, like the mid-1800s. And, like, BYU Hawaii opened in, like, the 50s. And so it's just really interesting to have this church that had such a presence on the Hawaiian Islands and was so keen on, like, converting Hawaiian folks to Mormonism, to have this, like, very anti-Black stance for a while. And I think it's just, like, they were, the point about Brazil, like, they were doing mission work in places where it's, like, they couldn't really continue being racist if they were gonna get converts in these places.
Right.
So it's another, again, like, this, like, survival thing where it's, like, fuck, we're, like, doing really well in these places at converting people, but, like, now there's this friction, and so we just need to, like, have a revelation from God.
Yeah. Yeah, so missionary work is really central to the Mormon church, and essentially, after World War II, Mormonism becomes a worldwide organization, and missionaries are, like, rapid fire sent across the globe. The Mormon church doubled in size every 15 to 20 years. By 1966, there were more Mormons outside of the United States than inside of the United States. So, I want to jump into a little bit about, like, Mormon culture, okay? So I think we've really captured a lot of the history of Mormonism and its foundations. Essentially, with Mormon culture, members are expected to dedicate significant time and resources to serving in their churches. A notable practice among both young and retired Mormon church members is to serve on full-time missions. So one thing that Mackenna and I have alluded to is that it is almost universally young men. So after you finish high school, if you are a Mormon man, you are sent on a 2-year mission somewhere in the world to go be a missionary for the Mormon church.
My friend Connor got to go to Australia. I also know people who've gone to, like, Arkansas.
Yeah, like
so it's really luck of the draw where you get sent.
Yeah, like I knew somebody who went to Japan and learned how to speak Japanese.
Yeah, because they teach, like, if you get sent to a place where you do not speak the language, you, like, go to the missionary training center and they teach you that language. So I know someone who served in Colombia, I think, and so it's like he didn't know Spanish, so he had to, like, learn Spanish before they sent him there. And same with, I know someone who served in France, and, like, he was in Lyon and they, like, taught him French before he went to France.
Yeah, and basically, like, if you go on a Mormon mission, you've got a, like, I'm forgetting what the fucking name of it is. What is the name of your buddy?
Your partner. Your mission partner.
Okay, yeah. You've got your mission partner.
Sorry, I'm wrong. It's companion.
Oh, your companion. I knew
partner.
it!
It's your companion.
Yeah.
It's your companion.
Yeah, so your companion is, that's your fucking dog, that's your fucking boy, and, you know, part of that is, like, safety, right? Sometimes going to places where it's not safe to just be somebody being a missionary by yourself, because that can put you in a dangerous position in many places.
Fully have a friend who served in the Caribbean and had someone pull a gun on him.
Yeah. And also it's a little bit of like policing because, you know, if you're an 18-year-old boy and you get sent someplace that's really cool and exciting, your companion is there to make sure that you are keeping the faith, that you are
Yeah.
on the straight and narrow, and
Yeah.
they will rat your ass out immediately. Members of the Mormon Church have a health code that basically says no alcohol, no tobacco, no tea, no coffee, no addictive substances. That is why Mormons love sody pop.
Do you want to know some lore about the tea and coffee thing?
Yeah.
So part of this was because Joseph Smith would have all the boys over to his house and they would drink, I think it was like hot toddies basically. And basically Emma Hale, Joseph Smith's wife, was getting so fucking sick of the boys being over all the time. And it like almost led to her leaving Joseph Smith. And so he has this revelation about specifically hot beverages and is like, we can't do hot beverages anymore, boys. It's out. Because it like was like his sort of like his gimme to his wife to be like, we'll stop coming over and drinking. I think they were hot toddies. I can't exactly remember what beverage they were drinking, but it basically that's why the hot beverage thing. Why why? Because I think a lot of people think it's a caffeine thing, but it's a hot beverage thing.
Yeah, and it was for a long time interpreted as a caffeine thing because growing up, my mom was like, Mormons can't drink soda because none of the Mormons who she grew up with drank soda because it was considered a no substance. But just like how Mormons change their mind about black people, they change their mind about soda pop.
Yeah, you'll hear, and I think that this has been somewhat dispelled, but you'll hear that it's because, like, there was, like, a whole thing about, like, the LDS church owned stock in Pepsi, and, like, probably, but there's no, like, evidence of that. And so a lot of people will claim that the reason why Mormons are allowed to drink soda now is because of, like, some, like, the church does, like, have stock, and that's, like, part of why they have so much money, but, like, it is largely a rumor that the 100% reason that, like, Mormons are allowed to drink soda now is because there was, like, they had Pepsi stock.
Yeah, no, that shit tastes delicious, and Mormon businesses were like, hey, we can sell these dirty sodas and everybody's gonna love them.
Yeah.
And they do. Mormons tend to be very family oriented, as we've talked about, and there's really strong connections across generations and also with extended family, which reflects the belief that families can be sealed together beyond death. So you will hear a lot of people say Mormons think they get their own planet when they die. That is like somewhat of an oversimplification. The belief is more like those who achieve like an exalted status in the celestial kingdom that you go to when you die can become like God, and that they might have the opportunity to participate in the creation and stewardship of worlds, and your eternal family can continue to grow and progress. A lot of this is somewhat mystified and is kind of, in my opinion, purposefully meant to be kind of confusing and complex, so that you can just go, okay, yeah, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would say the main takeaway from like Mormon afterlife stems from this belief that like your family is gonna stay your family after you die, and you guys are gonna be together forever. So like, be super chill with your family because you guys are like, from fucking, for the rest of eternity, these are your people.
Yeah, exactly.
Mormons are expected to adhere to a law of chastity, requiring abstention from sexual relations outside of your heterosexual marriage, and an expectation of fidelity within marriage. So not, too dissimilar from most people who identify as, like, strongly Christian.
Aubrey, are we going to talk about soaking?
I thought you were going to ask if we were going to talk about temple garments.
Well,
we
of course, I have that question as well, but right now the relevant topic is soaking.
I will let you have a diatribe into soaking 101.
Okay. So first of all, okay. I'm gonna define two terms for everyone right now. So there's soaking and there's also nikmos, and I want to talk about both of those things because these are both terms that were very important to the young Mormon people that I grew up around. So soaking is the idea that if you put a penis into a vagina but no one's moving There's no thrusting. It means, it means that doesn't count as sex, right? This is very much like an urban legend. Like, so I don't know anyone who has soaked. It's like basically like a loophole, and so people like there are so many jokes about soaking, but like it's not really a thing that actually happens.
No.
What does happen, and you also with soaking, you also hear about like having like a buddy hide under your bed and like shake the bed, because then it's like this is all like myths and jokes for the internet, basically. However, what is real is the idea of a NICMO, or a non-committal makeout. And so like basically, like, Mormons generally are like, you know, dating to marry. It's very much a culture. Like, many of my friends who were Mormon were married at like age 20, 21, 22, right? Like, very much like a ring before spring sort of, you know, the kind of situations, right? And so a NICMO is a non-committal makeout where you are like hooking up with someone, but it's a loophole for like not premarital sex, and like your ability to like hook up with someone without intention of marrying them. But yeah, so a NICMO is real. Soaking is not.
I would say that with Mormons, more so than people who are in, like, I keep saying like traditional Christianity. I just don't really know a better word for what I'm trying to describe. But like, Mormons tend to marry quite young. Part of that is because when you're 18 and you like really want to fuck, but you think God is going to be really fucking mad at you if you fuck somebody who you're not married to, like, encourages this like quite young marriage.
I mean, I would say it's very similar among, you know, friends I knew. I grew up around because of where me and Aubrey grew up. Many of the people, so the churches around near where me and Aubrey grew up were Mormon churches, Catholic churches, and then these giant non-denominational Christian mega churches, right?
Capitalism is the religion, baby.
Oh yeah, absolutely 100%. Like, the one that was near our high school had a skate park as a part of it. Yeah. So it's like, you know, a lot of people I know who went to like those churches did not end up marrying young, because it was like this like non-denominational like youth group sort of Christianity, right? Whereas, like, friends I know who grew up, like, evangelical, like, they know people, or were people who got married super duper young for the same reasons that Mormons get married super duper young. Well, oh, also, I should define what I mean by ring before spring. So, ring before spring is a term that you will hear used as, like, the goal of getting engaged before the spring semester of your senior year. And that is very true at specifically faith-based colleges like BYU, or somewhere like Calvin College, which is a Christian college in Michigan.
Can you imagine you're like a professor of like some kind of like class a lot of seniors take at BYU, and it's like, you know, they're all getting engaged over Thanksgiving. So it's like you have all these girls and then they come back from Thanksgiving and they're all just engaged. Hilarious.
Yes, hilarious. Literally hilarious. But yeah, so like, I think that is a way in which like you have like Mormonism and like evangelical Christianity, which are also, you know, more likely to be doing things like missionary work like that. I think that's where you see the sort of like handshake between those two religions, as it were.
Yeah. Quick little kind of diatribe about Utah Mormons. So there are kind of mixed things about Utah Mormons, and I think that specifically Secret Lives of Mormon Wives might be changing this, where on average, historically, Utah Mormons were considered more culturally and politically conservative than those who are outside of Utah. But after the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives came on, I was like, hold on, these girlies, they are not wearing garments. They are not doing some of these Mormon things. And I kind of did a little bit of a dive about like what is going on here. And there are a lot of Utah Mormons who are saying there is this rising faction of women, like, or not women, men too, like Mormons in Utah who are like Mormon in name, but they do things that are not necessarily like, you know, like they will like drink alcohol, right? And that's like a big no for Mormons. I also do think that maybe the Arizona Mormons who we grew up around might also be a little more strict than the average Mormon. So because I can't imagine someone where we grew up saying I'm Mormon but I drink. But in Utah there is kind of a rising faction of these like more. The term that I've heard with like Christians is they'll call them creasters. So like people who go to church on Christmas and Easter, but like aren't.
There's
really...
a term for this in Mormon. It's Jack Mormons.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So Jack Mormons used to mean someone who was inactive or non-practicing. Now it has evolved to mean someone who is still in the church, still like maintains a friendly relationship with the church, still considers themselves Mormon, but does things like drink, smoke tobacco, drink coffee, etc. Yeah, so that's what the term Jack Mormon refers to. But yeah, so Jack Mormon is exactly what you're describing, Aubrey, like with like the creasters, like that it is that is a Jack Mormon.
Yeah. And then quick note, because I realized that we talked about wards earlier. So the church is divided by locality into congregations called wards, with several wards or branches to create a stake. A Mormon ward will consist of anywhere from 150 to 500 people. So, like, you might have your specific ward, which is, like, probably all the, like, Mormons in your town, if you live somewhere where there are a lot of Mormons, so there's a lot of wards. Or if you live somewhere where there's not a lot of Mormons, your ward might be, like, all of the Mormons in, like, a significant radius around you. Mormons who consider themselves observant Mormons also contribute about 10% of their income to the church as a tithing. That is part of the part of why the Mormon church has a lot of money, is that in order to be a like Mormon in good standing, you have to give them kind of a fucking lot of your money.
Yes.
I want to talk about family home evenings or family fun night.
Can I say I've been to one, and let me tell you, it's a good time.
So I have never been to a family fun night. Josh has been to a family fun night, and I said, "Did you have fun?" And he said it was really lame.
I mean, it's playing board games.
Yeah. Basically, the concept of a united family that lives and progresses forever is at the core of Mormon doctrine. So Mormons place a pretty fucking high importance on family life, and many Mormons hold a weekly family home evening or family fun night, which is an evening that's set aside for family bonding, study, prayer, other activities that they consider to be wholesome. In 2018, the church changed the name from Family Home Evening back to the original name, Home Evening. This is because even though it is, and growing up, we always called it Family Fun Night, but that might have also just been like the local slang for it.
Yeah.
Basically, Family Fun Night is, if you're like a Mormon family, you're just kind of like all hanging out together. And it's not necessarily just the family, because like Mackenna said, and like my husband said, you can invite friends over, but you can't like, okay, we're at family fun night and we're gonna go to my room and hang out. Like, no, you are locked into what the family is doing. Talk a little bit about what you did at your family fun night.
So sometimes you're on vacation in Los Angeles with your two friends who are Mormon, before your guys' freshman year of high school. And literally we like hung out. I think we ordered a pizza and we hung out and we played just like a metric fuck ton of board games.
Because like, what else can you do?
What is the game? Okay, it's the one where you have the little device and there's a word on it and you're trying to describe the word to your teams.
Is it like categories?
It's like kind of like it's like the little machine though. Okay, game where it's the little machine and you're trying to guess the words.
And they are typically done on Monday nights, because Sunday is supposed to be your church day, and then Monday evening is like your family activity night.
Catchphrase. We played catchphrase for such an unbelievable amount of time.
Yeah.
And it was very competitive.
Yeah.
It was fun. I mean, I was like, just like, I was just on vacation with my friends Alyssa and Emma, and that's what was happening.
Yeah. And like, genuinely, like, I'm not gonna knock this. Like, I think it's good for families to play games together and do activities together. The kind of part that is just like kind of quirky and funny is to have it be part of your religion with a specific name that you do this every week.
Right.
And yeah, like, Some people will make the argument that it is activities like that that keep Mormon families together. I would also say that when you are in a religious community where divorce is highly discouraged and your entire community is rooted in your like religious group that says that when you marry someone that you are tied to them for eternity, that discourages you from ending relationships even if they do not serve you or are abusive.
Yeah, divorce is allowed in the LDS church, but it's not like...
It is like heavily frowned upon and like
Yeah.
I would say quite heavily stigmatized.
Yeah. Which I think for most Christian denominations is pretty common.
Yeah.
But like that is a part of Mormonism as well.
Yeah. So when it comes to queer people and the Mormon church, same-sex marriages are not performed or supported by the Mormon church.
Is everyone surprised? Is anyone shocked right now by that news?
No. Church members are encouraged to marry and have children, and Mormons in general tend to have large families. Mormons are opposed to abortion, except in some exceptional circumstances like incest or rape, or if the health of the mother is in serious jeopardy. Like, the Mormon view on abortion is like, you know, if you have an oopsie pregnancy, you should not have an abortion. But if there has been, like, a crime that has done to you, or you will literally die if you try to have a baby, like, then it is okay. Which, I don't know. I guess if we're ranking religions by their abortion views, I guess that's better than saying you better have a baby even if you're going to die and also the baby will die and then everybody's just dead.
Yeah.
Mormons are counseled not to partake in any form of media that is obscene or pornographic, and that includes media that depicts graphic representations of sex or violence. Tattoos and body piercings are generally discouraged, but it sounds like that is like starting to wiggle a little bit. Like, not like Mormons are going to be like, yeah, your neck tattoos are chill, but if you're like a little blonde girl with Utah curls and you get a little daisy on your ankle, that seems like that's starting to be, you know, not the worst. Or if you get get a little cross on your wrist.
It's not like, you know, when there are some sects of like Judaism where it's like if you get a tattoo you can't be married in a Jewish graveyard, right? So it's like it's not like that in Mormonism.
Yeah. Gonna take a minute to talk about the garments. So many practicing adult Mormons do wear religious undergarments that remind them of covenants and encourage them to dress modestly, right? Most Mormons that you meet do not wear like spaghetti strap tops or like short skirts. Modest dressing is encouraged. Although, again, I think there's a little bit of wiggle room depending on where you are and how strictly Mormon your environment is.
Bruh, it's hot in Arizona.
Right. Yeah. Like, I think that, like, I would say, like, when we were growing up, if you were, like, a Mormon girl and you wore a tank top, but with jeans and tennis shoes, like, that would probably be considered modest enough.
Yes.
But if you were wearing like a tank top and a tiny skirt and like, you know, high heels, that's a no-no.
No.
Yeah. So temple garments are a type of underwear that are worn by adherents to the Mormon church after they have taken part in the endowment ceremony. The endowments...
That's where they give you your wiener.
Yeah. The endowment ceremony is a two-part ceremony designed for participants to become kings, queens, priests, and priestesses in the afterlife. In the first part, participants take part in a scripted reenactment of the biblical creation and fall of Adam and Eve. The ceremony includes a symbolic washing and anointing and a receipt of a new name, which they are not to reveal to others except at a certain part in the ceremony. And it also is the time where you receive your temple garment, which Mormons are then expected to wear under their clothing throughout their life. This is something that has shifted over time. Now, I would say even quite like strict Mormons that I have met don't wear their garments 24/7.
Yeah, it's much more a thing that you wear when you go to the church.
Yeah. In the second part of the endowment ceremony, participants are taught symbolic gestures and passwords considered necessary to pass by angels guarding the way to heaven and are instructed not to reveal them to others. sisters?
It's a confirmation ceremony in Catholicism with some Scientology razzle-dazzle.
Yeah. Is it harmful? No. Is it quirky? Yeah. It's the part of like Mormonism where you're like, the shit gets a little we're getting a little funky with it.
Mormons are quirked up white boys, and also like in the same way that like
it's why they do backflips.
In the same way that like L. Ron Hubbard was writing a sci-fi novel when he created Scientology. It's like part of this was Joe Smith was spinning a friggin' yarn, bro, and so we had to put some details in there.
Yeah, basically, like, garments used to, I think, be a bigger part of Mormonism, and then, like, I think the Mormon church, like, cringed themselves out, because there used to be kind of a belief that, like, wearing your garments gave you, like, spiritual protection, and there's, like, Mormon folklore about, like, someone got into an accident, but they were wearing their garments, and they were the only one who survived. But in 2014, the church released an explanatory video that showed photographs of temple garments, and basically they state explicitly there is nothing magical or mystical about temple garments. And again, that is branding, because too many people were making fun of Mormon underwear, and so the Mormon church had to be like, yep, it's just undies, because for a long time you couldn't find photos online of what temple garments looked like, and it was kind of like a hush-hush, like, non-Mormons aren't even supposed to know what they look like. But then in 2014, the church was like, yep, we are being very honest and upfront about what they look like. Also, we're gonna kind of like cut back on this a little bit. So going back to discussion of like queerness and Mormonism, there are queer Mormons. Queer Mormons remain in good standing in the church as long as they abstain from any kind of same-sex relations and they obey the law of chastity. While there are no official numbers, LDS Family Services estimates that on average 4 or 5 members per Mormon ward experience same-sex attraction. So that's probably 4 or 5 people out of a like 200 to 500 member ward. Gary Watts, who's the former president of Family Fellowship, estimates that about 10% of queer Mormons stay in the church and that the rest probably leave. Many individuals have come forward through different support groups or websites discussing their like queerness and their feelings of being queer and the complicated feelings that they have about staying in the church or leaving the church. And it is a really, really sad topic to start to read about because people kind of have to decide whether they want to keep the church and community that they have had throughout their life while actively denying their own identity and taking on celibacy, or you get to like be queer but you lose everything.
Hey, so what if this is something that someone who I know is going through? There is a person who is older than me, who is in near where I grew up, who it was sort of like obvious that this was a gay man who was married to a woman. And everyone was like, this is a gay man. This is a gay man. This is a gay man. This is simply a gay man, and there's something to be done about it. But no, was like, I'm not. I'm a straight man. And then sometime, this was in the past like 6 years, he makes this Facebook post that is like, yes, I am a gay man. I am a fully gay man. I am a fully gay man who is dedicating my life to God by being married to my wife and not having sex with men. And because I'm a Mormon, and that is what I must do to get my planet later, right? And it was the saddest thing I've ever read in my entire life. Yeah. Because it was just like, dog, like that sucks ass. That is like the way, and like also sucks ass for your fucking wife, bro. And like it was so depressing, and it was really interesting because also this is someone who I, is in his like 40s. And in contrast, I also have friends who are closer to my age, so either like my age or a little bit older, like, like now they're in their early 30s, who they got a divorce because one or both members of the marriage were gay, and they are no longer in the church. And it's one of those things that is so tricky to talk about. I have a friend whose parents are still Mormon, but all of the children, all of him and all of his siblings have left the church at this point for various reasons. One of which is that one of his siblings is trans. And so it was like, I cannot be in the church. I'm trans. And so it's really a thing that, like, people I know personally are dealing with, and it super sucks.
Yeah, and I think that one of my biggest criticisms of Mormonism and the church in general is that I do think that it sows these seeds that in various paths, right? On one path, this can cause people to take their own life. On the other path, I think that this frankly sows the seeds for like sexual misconduct, and this is for both queer and straight people, because when people are sexually repressed and they're refused an outlet to explore like sexuality, and I mean that in like straight and queer sexuality in a healthy way with consenting partners, like they're like bad things can happen from that.
Yeah.
You know, I've talked about this before, but like when I was in grad school, I was sexually harassed by a male colleague who was about 10 years older than me, and he was a self-identified Mormon man. And the other like part of him and his identity that is just like looped into all of this is like he allegedly identified as gay, and his wife had this mommy blog about their intersexuality relationship, and she had a post that went viral about how she met her husband, and basically the day they met he was like, I'm gay, I'm not really attracted to women, but I like you a lot and I really want to have a relationship with you and I think we could build a family together. And they pursue that, and they had 2 young children, and he and I met when I was in grad school, and he was in a different position than me, and very conventionally handsome man. And one of my biggest fears when I talked about his sexual harassment of me was that I really was afraid that I wouldn't be believed, because not only was he incredibly handsome, his wife was stunningly beautiful. I mean, the kind of typical picture of like beautiful Mormon woman, of like just tall and blonde, and they have these 2 children and are this picture perfect Mormon family. And the year that he sexually harassed me on Facebook, I had seen that his wife commissioned a painting of him where he was like wearing a crown of thorns like Jesus, because he had this like long dark Jesus hair. And
that's not sacrilegious. That's not sacrilegious at all.
You know, and just all these posts about him being this like great leader of their family and everything like that. And you know, when my mom first found out about the sexual harassment and I, you know, showed her what he looked like and stuff like that, she said, I mean, I'm sure part of you is a little bit flattered. And after, you know, the sexual harassment, I really struggled with whether or not to tell his wife. And finally, I sent her a long message on Instagram with screenshots, because I really had never spoken to her. And I basically said, like, hey, if I was with a man who said these things to a younger female colleague, I would want to know. And she responded much quicker than I thought. And she basically said, oh my God, Aubrey, he is such an idiot. And he didn't know that he had crossed a line. She made the argument that he didn't know he crossed a line by telling me that he dreamed about ejaculating on me, having sex with me, impregnating me. And what has always stood out to me is that in the last line of the message that she sent, she said, Aubrey, I'm so sorry that you're another victim of white male patriarchal stupidity. And I think to her, I would just say, same to you. Because while I will forever grapple with the trauma that Mormon man inflicted on me, at least I don't have to share a planet with him when I die.
I have several things to say. Number 1, I did not realize that's how your mom reacted to it, but I won't get into it on the podcast. But I'm sorry she did that. Number 2, I hate when women weaponized incompetence for their own husbands. Like, I hate when women weaponize incompetence for their own husbands. And it's like, I don't care if what he was doing was being a stupid man. I don't care if you think that he genuinely didn't know that was a bad thing to do. Don't weaponize excuse for your adult man husband. Like, it is unacceptable whether he knew what he was doing was wrong or not. But part 3, I wouldn't tell a male friend of mine or a female friend of mine for whom there is no power dynamic with that I have thought about or dreamt about having sex with them. I would not, especially not in graphic detail, right? And so it's like, I would not do that to a friend, a good friend with whom there is no power dynamic. I certainly would not do it with a colleague who there was no power dynamic with, and I certainly would not do it with a colleague with whom there is a power dynamic. And so I just am like, the amount of cope, I think that's like, in the same, and this is a very different thing than the person I know who is staying in a marriage in a heterosexual marriage despite being a gay man. But the amount of cope that I feel like any person in this type of marriage that is so predicated on religion has to be doing in order to stay with their partner, it's like, just fucking get out of there.
Right. And like, to be clear, like, the criticisms that I feel around the Mormon church have existed before I experienced, like, like sexual violence from a self-identified Mormon. But I think that since that happened, it has really allowed me, because I spent a lot of time trying to rationalize and understand why I was victimized in the way that I was. And at the end of the day, sometimes life is just very cruel in its randomness. And also, I think that the man who inflicted that sexual violence on me, I think that he grew up in an environment where he was told certain things about sex and sexuality. I think that he felt an attraction to men. I think he felt an attraction to women. I think there were things that, if he was not confined to the parameters of the church and the expectations that the Mormon church has around sex and sexuality and like relationships, I think that he would have been able to express and find ways of understanding his sexuality rather than expressing the feelings that he did to me, which I still don't believe were meant to be harmful, but they were deeply harmful and have followed me for several years and probably for the rest of my life. And that doesn't make that experience, I don't know, it doesn't help it go down any smoother, but it is like, I don't know. I think it is difficult to see the ways in which like truly like hurt people, like as cliche as it is.
Well, that's why I think, I've been talking about this a lot more recently that like, what this podcast is about is how the media impacts like beauty and body perception, right? But I think the low-key project of this podcast, because of our shared interest in gender, has ultimately become dismantling the pieces of the patriarchy that then involve gender, sexuality, violence, and all those things. Like, we talk about so much about those things, and that's like, I do think like the low-key long-term project of this podcast is the dismantling of patriarchal ideals that affect both men and women, especially in regards to beauty, body standards, sex, and sexuality. And this is just like another example of that like, a man who grew up in a system in which he was told certain things about sex and sexuality might, not will, might act out in this way and inflict this type of violence. That does not release him from culpability and just make him some dumb idiot. It is emblematic of a structure that he grew up in that is harmful, but that does not mitigate the individual impact of his actions.
Well, and I think there's also just a cultural thing of Mormon women doing this for Mormon men in a way that is not dissimilar from other cultural groups, but I think is very baked into Mormonism and a lot of religions in general, of just like these systems where men clearly have the power, but the women are also the ones running the household, and especially with Mormons specifically, where Mormons tend to be educated. So these are like educated women with college degrees. Like, they then have to like reconcile with some of the cognitive dissonance of their religion. And I think that's what is so fascinating to me when I went to grad school and worked with these developmental psychologists who identified as Mormon. Like, I worked with Mormon women who consider themselves feminist, and I find that so fascinating.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that you can't be religious and be a feminist. I think that, like, in the same ways in which people try to, like, have a dogma around, like, what is punk and what isn't punk, like,
Right.
I think Christianity is the same way, where it's like, you can't really say it all is or isn't. It's kind of all both and all nothing.
Yeah. Famously, everything's made up and the points don't matter. But yeah, I think that that's like, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more next time. I literally do not want to get into it right now. But like, I think that that is a thing that is very apparent in watching The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. It was the reason I had to stop watching it eventually, is just like, none of these women should be with any of these men, except for maybe one exception. But, like, more importantly, like, as I'm watching the show, I was like, I am just seeing the ways in which, like, culturally, like, the power dynamics and the majority of those relationships are so fucking fucked up. And it 100% is just like, and like the way that they even interact with each other as women, like peer-to-peer women interactions, the way that the men interact with each other, it's like, it's so part of this like binary, heterosexual, patriarchal society that they all very much grew up with and are still intertwined with, even though this show is about the women. And it's very fascinating, and we'll get into more of it next time, but it was why eventually I had to stop watching it, because I was just like, this is just painful to like watch these systems get propagated over and over and over again.
Well,
I also want to say one more thing, and I think we can close on this. Aubrey, it's really funny that you bring up the fact that a lot of these Mormons that you work with as developmental psychologists. I've been listening to a lot of the Worst of All Possible World series on Adventures in Odyssey, which is a children's Christian radio drama. And the founder of Focus on the Family, who is the people who produce Adventures in Odyssey, is James Dobson. If you don't know who James Dobson is, he's fucking dead, thank God. But he was the founder of Focus on the Family and, like, was an extremely influential conservative figure, right? He also, very importantly, was a trained child psychologist,
yeah,
right? And you know, we are coming at this from a lens in which we are doing this podcast because Aubrey is a psychologist and I am some fucking guy. But the sheer act of working in psychology does not make one woke. And you can be a woke diva like Aubrey Hoffer, PhD, by the way, and you can also be James Dobson. And so I would like to dedicate this episode to both Brigham Young and James Dobson rotting in hell, baby. A thing that I don't even believe in. But that's why I'm saying I want to exhume him and kill him again. Add James Dobson to the list, because if there's one thing that I hate, it's a child psychologist. Aubrey, I'm coming for you next.
Oh boy!
Have a question or a topic that you would like for us to discuss? Send us an email at informedattraction@gmail.com.